so there's different ways in which public value can be achieved in those relationships, which is not happening right now. First of all, that word that I just used, public value, believe it or not, doesn't exist in economics. And that's not surprising because, again, value is assumed to only occur in companies, value creation.
All right, so police, nurses, firefighters, all of that value is not recognized at all.
No, they are important in the economy. Their salaries are included in GDP as a cost, but the value they're actually creating, because it's often free, you don't pay for the police, you don't pay for the nurse, at least in countries that are civilized and have a public healthcare system. Anyway, that's another conversation. Then it's also very hard to measure the productivity also and the usefulness and the value of government activities, because we only look at the costs in GDP, whereas with the private sector, we also have the actual output that they sell. But without getting too complicated on that, the point is that this term public value, it's really hard to talk about it actually in economics when it's assumed that value occurs inside business, and what the state does is just kind of do the background things which facilitate or enable value to be created in business. And there's a technical word for that. You're fixing market failure. So funding things that the private sector won't fund, you're filling a gap. It's always like this mending, fixing, filling the gap kind of exercise. Already with the words, even my facial expression, you can probably tell, it's kind of boring to talk about it that way. And so what then happens is also the confidence of the people working in government also gets reduced. At worst, it creates hemorrhaging. Top people want to leave government when they're not seen as value creators, and they're always either called, an impediment to growth, or at best, de-risking the cool guys in business. And so literally the contracts we set up become problematic. And the example I always give, because it's so stark, is the case of Tesla. Elon Musk is often in the news. He has these three companies, Solar City, SpaceX, and Tesla. First of all, he got $5 billion from the US government, from Uncle Sam. And I often say, never said thank you. I am a mother of 4 kids. I always tell him to say thank you. So that's the first problem. He never said thank you. So people don't know, because if he said thank you out loud, then actually that would become part of the public discourse. No one knows that. So just with Tesla, example, he got from the Department of Energy a $465 million guaranteed loan. And the same kind of portfolio of investments, and this was during the period in which Obama was really trying to steer the economy in a greener direction, included investing in Solyndra, which was a company that most people in the U.S. also know about, but not because it was successful.
No, it failed.
But because it was a massive failure.
Yeah.
And the taxpayer had to pick up the bill. Got bailed out, right? Because it's a guaranteed loan. It's guaranteed by who? The taxpayer. So $500 million. Now, what Obama did, and it's just quite striking, because he actually had Goldman Sachs guys in government. As we know, that becomes a continued problem, the presence of those kind of interests in government. Anyway, they should have said to him something different. Instead, what he said was, if you don't pay back the loan to Tesla, we get 3 million shares in your company. The price per share went from 9 to 90. So had he said, when they took out the loan, 2009, it was 9, 2013, it was 90. So why would you want 3 million shares in a crappy company that doesn't pay back the loan? Doesn't make any sense. Had he said, we'll take out 3 million shares if you are successful and pay back the loan, which makes sense, right? Because the government's taking risk. For each Tesla, you will have inevitably 3, 4, or 5 Solyndras. Any venture capitalist will tell you that. Had he actually taken out those shares with the success, he would have had more than enough, given the difference in share price, to pay back the Solyndra loss and the next round of investments.
So why didn't he?
Because you only start thinking this way and ask those kind of questions if you see yourself as an investor, if you see yourself as a co-creator of wealth alongside business. This is not state versus business. And this is always about collaborations. We need public-private partnerships as much as in the green economy as we had in the IT revolution. It's very important to collaborate, but it's very hard to collaborate if one side is always kind of seen as the kind of boring de-risker and the other side gets to be all kind of dynamic and interesting, not just because that creates a self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of where people want to work, but also, again, the contracts. And what I do in the book, the new book on value, is I really bring these questions down to the fundamental assumptions in these conversations, again, about where value comes from. So, if we do want a strategic, active investor within the public sector to do in the green revolution what we had in IT, where everything in our iPhone is publicly funded, right? Internet, GPS, touchscreen, Siri. That's the story I don't tire of telling if we want that, big if, because if we don't want it, then nothing. But then we won't have much technological change, history tells us. If we want that, we really need to start asking, how do we socialize not only the risks, but also the rewards? But, in finance, we really haven't reformed the system. Again, we have a 10-year anniversary. Everyone is not so much celebrating, but talking about this week about the crisis. We still have speculative short-term finance. We still have, again, industry not reinvesting its profits. So the profit-wage ratio is at record levels. So there's no profits problem. There's a reinvestment problem. We have private debt to disposable income back at the level it was just before the crisis. And by the way, that's what caused the crisis. All this talk about public debt and austerity was kind of this distraction. What caused the crisis was private debt. And we had then the public sector come in and save the day, bail out the banks, and produce a bit of fiscal stimulus. But then very quickly that turned into different forms of austerity, which then really made growth limp, but also didn't have enough bold policies that really could have steered the system in such a way that we worry just as much about the direction of growth as of the rate of growth. But what I try to do in the book, again, is say, these policies that basically weren't there or that have failed, in order for us to really also take advantage of this 10-year anniversary and to change things for real, why not bring it back down to first principles and see how both in the pharmaceutical industry, in finance, in the Uber economy, the whole data economy, we currently have a very problematic situation where, value extraction activities are passing for value creation activities, or simply the rewards being earned by particular actors are completely disproportionate to what actually happened in that sector in terms of looking at all the other collective actors who were important.
Well, let me jump in on that,
because the digital
because
economy is very interesting.
Sure. Let me jump